Hi, you're watching On the Couch Conversations with Muki. Today I have a conversation with Cara Geduld. Hi Cara, welcome to On the Couch.
Hi, Dr. Muki. It's lovely to be here with you today.
Really, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you. It's been a while and I really wanted to talk to you. So Cara, for someone who doesn't know you, who would you say, Cara is?
Cara is from Gqeberha and she recently moved to Cape Town and started studying in Cape Town. And at the moment, she works as a marketing actuarial graduate at Swiss Re, which is a reinsurance company. But I would say that Cara is a very bubbly person, a very outgoing person, someone that loves adventure and someone that is incredibly resilient. And I think that you'll find that in our conversation today, you'll see a lot of that through the stories that we tell, the stories that we share.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit more about who Cara is.
Yes, and I love your smile, Cara. Really love your smile. So, Cara, you're saying that you're from Gqeberha. Tell us a little bit about your studies. You said you moved from Gqeberha to Cape Town to study. So you studied at UCT.
Yes.
What did you do there?
Of course. So Cara's from Gqeberha. I went to Alexandra at high school. So I started out my education there and I was very involved at school. From a young age, I liked getting involved with all sorts of different initiatives. I loved exercise. I loved hockey. I loved being involved at the school and contributing in any way that I could. And when it came time to decide on my studies, I wanted to study actuarial science.
And you knew about that already?
I did not know about that.
So
I
how
found
did that come about? Yes.
Of course, one of my friends in grade 9 or 10 came up to me and said, Cara, you're so good at maths.
Yeah.
Why don't you study actuarial science? And in my mind, I had absolutely no idea what that was. I never heard about it before. I never met anyone that was an actuary. I never met anyone that studied it. So I had to do a lot of
So someone who
research.
studies it is an
actuary.
Oh, yes, because I was thinking actuarial scientist. Oh, it's an actuary. Okay, now we got that right.
But you have to, it's quite a long process. So you study it, you get the degree, you can't yet call yourself an actuary.
Okay.
You'll first be an actuarial analyst and then you have a few exams similar to chartered accounting and law.
Oh, I see.
Before you can call yourself an actuary.
All right, let's go back to school now.
Of course. So I was speaking to this friend and they discussed, Cara, why don't you study actuarial science? And I started researching it. I looked into it. And to me, the description was someone that analyzes risk
Okay.
and puts a price to that risk.
Okay.
Right? And it involves maths, it involves statistics, economics, finance, business. So it felt to me like it was a good description of what I am and what I enjoy. And more so than that was that there was the potential to also communicate with people as a consulting actuary, as a marketing actuary, and you wouldn't just then be refined to your desk. So I was excited for that side of things. I didn't want to just sit behind my computer all the time. But then I wasn't able to study at NMU at the time because they didn't offer actuarial science.
Yeah.
So I started looking at other universities, mostly in Cape Town, because my family really enjoyed holidays in Cape Town and I knew it really well and it resonated well with who I am. I love the water, I love the beach, I love community, and it felt as if I could become a part of that community. One of my uncles lives there.
Okay.
So I was excited to move to Cape Town, to study in Cape Town. So I went for it, started applying for bursaries, started applying for different universities and ended up at UCT.
Great. And now let's talk about UCT, your experience there, your student life in general. Yeah.
I would say I went there with the idea that I'm going to focus on my studies and only my studies.
Yes.
Which isn't necessarily the best thing for who I am. So at the time, when I was in high school, I was extremely involved and I spread myself very thin. And I didn't want to repeat that going into university. So I went with the mindset of, I'm going to focus on me and my studies. But very quickly, you feel that sense of loneliness, especially when you're going to a place where you've never lived before and you're leaving your family behind, most of your friends. And I was living in res for my first 2 years. So at the residence called Tagwal Hall. And at first, I really wanted to only focus on my studies, but I found that I needed to create that sense of community. I needed to create and deepen friendships, and I found a very good set of friends. Initially, mostly just studying actuarial science, but then it spread to different parts of the institution. So I focused on my friendships in my first few years, and then I had a bit of a hiccup at the end of my second year, and I'm sure we'll discuss that soon. But later on in my university career, I came to the realization that Cara isn't someone that just goes to university, studies, goes home and calls it a day. Cara is someone that also wants to be involved, someone that wants to have leadership elements, someone that wants to work on women empowerment, someone that wants to be more involved. So I started to tutor. I tutored first year students in my later years. I initiated a women empowerment along with two other women called Fem Act. I was part of the house committee. So I would say my university career was very well-rounded, more so towards the end. So my third year, my second year, it maybe started towards the later years, but I really wanted to feel like me, even in my studies, because then it gives you more motivation to study. If you're well-rounded and you're planning for different areas of life, you make sure that you are getting to your academics and you make sure that that time spent studying is time well spent. So I really tried to ensure that that was what I spent my time with at university.
Now let's talk about, in my understanding, you went to your cities around 2015.
Yes.
So that was when I started being the dean, and higher education, you know, was in a transition. I call it a state of transition with FeesMustFall. Now, as a student who's from UCT, because we know the first rumblings of FeesMustFall started in Rhodes and at UCT, what would you say how that has impacted you and, you know, your studies at UCT?
I would say FeesMustFall was a very big eye-awakening for me. I went to university, like I said, wanting to only focus on my studies. And the first round of protests that I was exposed to was Rhodes Must Fall. And I had no idea what it meant. I would walk around campus, I would see students very overwhelmed with pride, and then also really wanting to decolonize this institution and make sure that symbolism of past injustices is destroyed, right? But at the time I didn't have the vocabulary for that, and I didn't have the understanding. So I would be one of those people that were like, why are they wasting their time on this? And I didn't understand it. Go study, go spend time, you know, on your studies. And I didn't understand it whatsoever. But later on, I made sure that I was a part of those conversations so that I could hear what was going on. I could hear the grievances. I could understand a bit more about what was going on. And at the end of that year was when the first round of FeesMustFall occurred in 2015. And again, it was just a time of listening. It was a time of supporting. I think that was one of the biggest rounds. 2015, 2016 was the height of the FeesMustFall movement. And when I got to second year, so in my second year, I had felt I was personally impacted, not necessarily by FeesMustFall, but the season of FeesMustFall. And I had a lot of difficulties happen in my personal life. And because I lived at Res, I was around a lot of people that were really impacted by the fees being as high as it is. Because that's the case. University is incredibly expensive, and many people can't afford their studies. And I would speak to a lot of other students, and a lot of them would share struggles of not necessarily being able to afford deodorant, let alone to be able to afford their studies. And from those conversations with different people, I really felt compelled to be more involved, because had I not been afforded the opportunity to study through a bursary, I don't know whether I would have felt comfortable to ask that of my parents, because I know that my parents would have had to take out some sort of loan in order to see that I studied, because it's incredibly expensive. And I think I would fall in that missing middle, and many students fall in that missing middle, and many fall in brackets even below that.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to support that initiative, and it came at a time where the school would get closed down, university would get closed down. Initially, okay, it will be closed for 2 days. 2 days turns into 2 weeks, 2 weeks into 2 months. And in that space, you don't look after yourself. Our kitchens usually close, so we wouldn't have catered food. We'd get meal vouchers and end up having to go to Main Road, which is quite a distance away from our apartment or from our res, in order to get food. And I had gone through something personal in my personal life that meant that I wasn't looking after myself. I stopped going to Main Road to look for those foods. I stopped feeding myself. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. And I would say the height of my experience with FeesMustFall protests was a specific night in October. It was a night vigil, which started out as a very beautiful evening. And I think that's what I felt for a lot of the movement was it would always start out as something so beautiful. Students sharing testimony, sharing poetry, sharing experiences. And I would walk around with this notepad where I would just take notes of everything because you feel so inspired in the surroundings. And I would take notes, and later on, we moved back to Steve Biko building, which is basically the SRC headquarters.
Okay, yeah.
And when we arrived, it had closed. And students' belongings were inside, their cell phones, their medication, all of these things. Our vice chancellor at the time had decided to close it in order to get students to leave the premises. So we had a few of the SRC members try to contact him, and they refused to open up the building. And on this evening, following what was occurring, trying to get hold of him, trying to open up the building, there was a mediator that was called in, and we tried to communicate with this mediator, but it wasn't getting anywhere. And then there was private security called in, as well as the police. And witnessing what happens in such a short amount of time. And personally, I had not been looking after myself, so I wasn't as reactive as I should be. So when that first stun grenade goes off, for instance, most students ran. I was standing still, taking notes of everything, not reacting. Something goes off in front of you, but you're still. And I would see private security go towards a glass window, stand in a row, and then the students behind that glass window being beat up. So I was just witnessing a lot of turmoil. And you walk around campus afterwards and you see bins on fire. There's just so much going on at the time. So that was one evening that really woke me up, that really meant that, okay, I needed to see to myself first, because a lot of what transpired with me was that I wasn't looking after myself. Another person would have ran away. I wasn't in a good state, and I needed to call my parents at about 2 a.m. that morning to ask for help, but I wasn't really asking for help. They couldn't tell what I was saying.
Oh my goodness.
They couldn't. I wasn't very clear, I wasn't coherent, and because they knew what was going on at the time, I was very vocal on Facebook as well. So they knew, okay, Cara, there
must be something,
something is going on, and they need to come.
And it's so interesting because when we hear the story of FeesMustFall, we often hear a different story, it's not that personal, and I'm happy that you're talking about this, because Chimam Adichie talks about, the danger of a single story. Because most of the time we only listen to this one side story, FeesMustFall, but never to the personal impact, that it has, on the individual, and the brutality and violence around that, and how that impacts on you. I'm so glad that you shared that. Now, Cara, you are there, you are at UCT, and I assume that you passed, because no one can become a tutor if you have not, passed well. But you mentioned in your conversation that you had a hiccup. And you call it a hiccup, so I'm not sure what that is. So what happened then?
On the 1st of October in 2016, I went to my res formal, and this was just before protests had unfolded. So I went to my res formal. I was wearing a beautiful all white suit, and I was having fun with my friends. It was my last year staying in res, so I really wanted to enjoy the evening. And we were consuming alcohol at the event. It was at the wine farm, so we were enjoying the night. And after the night, we decided to all go to an after party, and we ended up going to a club.
Okay.
And at this club, you continue drinking, I continued drinking, and I know that that was a lapse of judgment in terms of how much I drank. But what happened at the end of the evening was that someone came in, someone that I hadn't been speaking to at all in
the club.
Yes,
Okay.
not at all, just the last 5 minutes of the evening. And then I ended up with this person, but I can't tell you much about that encounter because it was at the point where I was blackout drunk. I then ended up with this person. The next morning, I end up waking up next to a person who I don't know, I don't recognize, and to this day, I wouldn't be able to tell you what this person looks like.
My goodness.
And this was just before protests had happened. So I completely blocked out the idea that this happened. I wanted to just continue with my life because you also have that part of yourself that blames yourself. Why was I that intoxicated?
Yes, yeah.
How did this happen? And you just want to continue with life. So I did. And I think that's also what was rooted in my not looking after myself. It's the reason why I wasn't going to the shops to buy food. It was the reason that I would never sleep. I'd go to protest that much. Although it is a cause that was close to my heart,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I do feel as though I was very fixated on it.
Because you wanted to block this thing
Yes.
out of your mind.
And in that evening where I was so stuck, I think it's like a combination of all of these things. I wasn't looking after myself, and you can't react. And because of that, it really impacted my mental health. But I didn't call it that at the time. I was so fixated on protests that even when my parents came to fetch me, I was like, no, you need to go protest yourselves. We need more. And they couldn't understand what was going on with me either. None of my friends could. Eventually, I decided to go back home with them. And I would say protests went on for a month. But it's October, right? So it's heading towards exam time.
Yes, yes.
So as soon as I got back home here with my parents, it was I needed to see someone, I needed to speak to someone, I needed to speak to a psychologist. And I started speaking to someone, and my immediate point of call was, I need to be better so that I can write my exams. Which, in that case, it's not good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Something had happened with a man I don't know. I can't account for anything of that evening. How do I know whether protection was used?
Yes.
I don't.
Goodness.
So that should have been my first priority,
Not exams.
exams.
Yeah.
But I think it's also rooted in that not wanting to fail.
Yes. Yeah.
Never having experienced failure before that. Thinking that people would look at you differently because of it. Just all of these thinkings that I had maybe growing up. And I also had this pressure of my bursary.
Yes.
Because if I lose my bursary,
it
means someone would have to pay it back. And then what do I do in terms of my studies?
Exactly.
I would have to possibly come back home, but then what do I study? It's the end of the year. So all of this stress is on my mind. And one of the first things I say to my psychologist is, okay, we can make a plan, because I love planning. Even in this not great state, we can make a plan. I'll write 3.
Oh, really?
I'll write 3.
Okay.
Make me better to write 3, and then I can defer 2.
Wow. And you're going in there saying, make me feel better. So the psychologist is going to solve your problems.
Yes.
But the end goal is that I'm going to write in November.
And I have 2 weeks left to go.
Oh, wow.
So eventually I write those 3 exams, and then I defer 2 of them. And when the results come back eventually, I had passed them.
Really?
But for actuarial science, you need a 70% for statistics. And I had gotten 63.
Oh, wow.
So to me,
another blow.
And it felt as if, I know it sounds very exaggerated, but it felt as if everything was crumbling, and it was a massive trigger for me because this meant I could potentially lose my bursary. And in my mind, that was a real reality. And this was holiday season. We're now in December when this result comes. And how do I convince Old Mutual to keep me? What do I do? So in a rush, straight after getting my results, I urged my parents, can we please go to Cape Town? I need to explain myself. And I still never properly recovered from everything.
Yes, yeah, and processed everything that has happened to you.
And when I got back to Cape Town, things had gotten so much worse. My parents and I were staying together, and we live in currently, even today, I live in the apartment where what
Everything
I can call now,
happened.
where everything happened.
So it happened in your apartment, your
It happened
own
in my
apartment?
own
Oh,
apartment.
Goodness.
So when we got back there, my parents, they can share the story with me, but they could see the differences in me. At some stage, I ended up running out of my apartment naked.
Oh my goodness.
And my mother, my father, they didn't know what that meant, right? Because they knew what had happened. I opened up to them about it. And now they're seeing Cara is not okay.
Yeah.
I went to speak to my bursar, to Old Mutual, and they couldn't recognize me. They said, we saw Cara just a month, 2 months before she was fine. Why does she look like this? Yes. She got good feedback. She was doing VAC work. How did this happen? So I also still wasn't sleeping. My mother would try and sleep next to me. I wasn't sleeping. So they decided to take me to a hospital in Cape Town. And at the hospital, I had to stay the night, and I essentially went to the psychology section or the psychiatry section. And in that space, things felt incredibly strange for me because that was almost when I started seeing things or seeing different people that weren't there.
Really?
So if I see another patient next to me, in my mind, that was one of my friends. So I'd see my friend there on my other side. Is this my right? On my left?
Yes.
On my left, I saw an older woman. I thought it was one of my friend's moms. The caretaker that would come in, I thought it was my uncle. And this continued for a long time, for a very long time. They gave me some sort of medication to help me sleep. My parents aren't too big on treating with medication. They, in this case, because it's internal, it's in my head, I need to speak through it. I need to find out what the root cause is and try and solve it that way. So they didn't want me to take too many...
And be overly medicated,
So
and depend on it,
Exactly. So they wanted the sleep medication because I wasn't sleeping, and this they felt would help in terms of being well rested, giving answers, So when I came home, it was over the festive season. It was incredibly difficult to see people, to speak to people. It was so difficult because most things would trigger me. Even going to a psychologist, I started going to a clinical psychologist. And at the end of it, she also said, I can't speak to her because I was in
another zone.
And I was still set on writing those 2 deferred exams.
Wow.
Even in the state. I
still wanted to write.
Oh
my goodness. Also, at least you knew that you had exams to write. So you were fixated on that, the achievement.
And I think that was the biggest cause. They called it acute stress disorder, which is like a step before PTSD.
Okay.
So the stress was the biggest thing for me. And I think that fed into a lot of what I was going through. Because as soon as I got rid of the stress, and I tried many times, my parents and I tried to take me to Cape Town, and then something would trigger me and I would have to come home in order to write those exams. And when it came to the point of me letting go of writing those exams and deciding I actually need time off.
Yes, to get healthy and look after yourself. Yes.
And that was the turning point. That was honestly the time that I could actually start looking after my health.
Because I was going to ask you, then you know, you went through this. What was the turning point? You know, people usually say, so this was your aha moment, you know, of let go. But so what caused you to realize that this is the thing that I'm holding on that's really making me sick as well?
It was when I kept going back, something would happen each time. I had a very supportive friend that was also studying for deferred exams, and they would help me throughout. As they study, I'd attempt to study. And each time, say I see another friend, something would go wrong. And then we'd have to call my parents, and then we'd have to make a plan for me to come back. So I'd come back, and I think it was getting incredibly close to this exam. A week before. And I was in no mental state to take it on. So I had to then my parents had to, for me, have the discussion with my bursars and my institution. I cannot write these exams. What are our options? What can we do? And my mother at the time was emailing with one of my lecturers, a close lecturer of mine, and she was sharing with her what had happened.
Yeah, good.
And she said, she gave my mother the options. There is the option to potentially take a leave of absence. And maybe we can look at this option. So my mother communicated this with me, and we then decided, okay, there's nothing we can do. If I go into this exam, keep in mind I need to do really well. I need to get above 70% for a maths exam. Is that possible?
Yes.
If you believe it's not possible, and it very well is not possible, you are in no space to write a whole year course in the state, and you have a week left to prepare. So eventually I let that go, and I said, okay, I can't write these exams. Is Old Mutual supportive? Yes, they are.
Okay, good.
Is the university supportive? Yes, they are. They understand the circumstances. Everything is in place for you to let go for now and return when you are better.
Yeah.
So it was really a thing of putting plans in place, not necessarily me, myself, but the collective was putting plans in place in terms of, okay, what can we do, and let go of that stress, come back home, take time off, and really focus on you, focus on turning it around. And my whole family was a part of that journey. My whole family, my brother at some point would sing to me. He took me to the gym with him. We'd go exercise together. I started sleeping again. I started eating well. My father made sure I was taking in my vitamins. My mother would sleep next to me. Everyone was involved in this recovery, because it wasn't just something I went through. All of us went
because
through.
I was also going to talk about the importance then of family, because a lot of people go through, you know, something similar to what you've gone through, but they don't have anyone, you know, to do the things, a simple thing as singing, you know, because that's a gesture of love, and you could see that you are loved. Now, Cara, your story does not end there, and it didn't end that night, and I'm happy to say that. And so you say your story is a story of overcoming, and you've established FemAct. Can you tell us a little bit about FemAct?
Of course.
Yeah.
So when I was returning, I returned back, and things lifted up for me quite a bit. When I came back to university, it was with the greatest sense of purpose, because I was a case study of what many women in South Africa go through. Many, and not many call it what it is.
Yeah.
Sexual assault while under the influence.
Yeah.
You cannot give consent in a situation like that.
Yes,
but so many people have other circumstances where they don't necessarily call it that. And when I returned to university, I really wanted to become more involved, and I was very involved in terms of women initiatives focusing on women. And my friend, one of my close friends, she was a part of the house committee, the Actuarial Science house committee. And she had spoken to Shivani Ranchard, who used to be the head of Actuarial Science at UCT. And she had founded her own company, Percept, alongside Dave Strugnell. And she came to the house committee and said, we used to have these women talks at UCT, but this hasn't happened for the past 10 years, where they would bring in a woman to speak, to empower the students, for students to see themselves reflected in someone like them. Because it's not something that we see on a regular. Women make up such a small percentage of actuaries in South Africa. And it's difficult to want to aspire to something if you don't see yourself in those spaces. So I was in the library one day. I was in one of my cubicles, focusing, probably studying statistics or something of the sort. And Kiara came into this cubicle and she said, would you be keen on getting involved in this initiative called, or it didn't have a name at the time, but would you be keen on helping me find speakers, that sort of thing? And this was pre-COVID. This was 2020 January about. And when she said this, I was blown away immediately. I'm like, yes, of course, let's do it. Why don't we have something like this? I was very excited. And we started the process. We started speaking to Shivani. We started making plans. 2 months later, we have this worldwide pandemic that started. We had shutdowns. We had all of this. And now the question arises, do we continue? What do we do? Do we have it online? What are our options here? So we decided to go with a webinar series, and it was focused on different topics that the different speakers could focus on. And I must say the responses were overwhelming, and it was amazing in terms of the speakers that we could get. We got people speaking about sexuality and gender. We had topics like leaning in. We had just all of these amazing topics, and we had students come to these series and really engage with the speakers as well. And I would say that it was a really powerful session, and it inspired even the next year to continue. Students that followed in our footsteps almost, that then tried to continue, and we almost passed the baton to them, and then they continue and make it into something of their own. But it was really something that inspired me. I loved the process, and I think it also helped in terms of making me more well-rounded. Afterwards, we had UCT News, which is almost like our news publication, reach out to us for an interview, and then we all gave our say, and it was about women in actuarial science, and it was something that wasn't necessarily mentioned in those spaces. We had newspapers in Cape Town also reach out to us afterwards. We had MJ, the fellow actuary, who has quite a large YouTube following. He also reached out to us for more information of it. So we had quite a lot of support in that time. And it was a lovely series that I think the students really valued.
And now you are working, you are a what?
An actuarial graduate. So
you are an actuarial graduate. I want to use the right term.
Of course.
And you've traveled the world. Can you just tell us a little bit about, your goings in Switzerland and Tanzania, and what, those projects are all about?
Of course. I started working at the beginning of 2021. So I joined Swiss Re as a marketing actuarial graduate. And it was something that I was really excited for. I applied in 2020 following most of what had occurred. And the reason why I really wanted to join Swiss Re was because it has this international graduate program, which is well sought after in the world. A lot of specifically actuarial graduates love Swiss Re for this, because it really looks at growing the person and in the whole sphere of things. So they don't just focus on yourself in AXA, they really teach you about different parts of the organization, because Swiss Re doesn't just have actuaries, it has accountants, it has interns, it has people working on catastrophes. It's very broad. And with this program, I would get the opportunity to rotate into a different part of the company. So part of that rotation meant that I could go to other parts of the world, and I decided to go to Switzerland, Zurich, because that's where our head office is. So most of our employees come from Zurich, about 3,000 is in one of the buildings alone. So I was very excited for this. I chose a role that I think was very near and dear to my heart. When I started at Swiss Re, I was really looking at how I could still continue with living a purposeful life.
Yes.
And immediately I wanted to get involved in more within the company. So I started with our CSI committee, our sustainability team, but then for my rotation, I didn't want to just go to another actuarial role. I wanted to find something in the company that would feel as though it is contributing in some way. So I found a space called Public Sector Solutions.
Okay.
And what that is it is contributing in terms of governments. So you look at your clients as governments and NGOs as opposed to insurance companies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And it's more well-rounded. It wasn't just focused in the life and health area. It's also property and casualty.
Okay.
So it's reinsuring all of these different sections. So I was very excited for that, and it meant that I could go over to Switzerland and work in the team there. And it was amazing. As soon as I arrived to our offsite, which is basically colleagues from different parts of the world all coming together to meet up and go for this session, development programs, that sort of thing. And it was people from Latin America, people from North America, from Africa, from Asia, everywhere.
Great.
And it was such a brilliant networking experience, and it was a perfect way to start my rotation because it meant I had connections with people all around, and I knew exactly who to speak to when I needed help. Because it was a new experience. I was in the new part of the company, and I only had 3 months to make an impact in this space. But it was brilliant. I loved the work that I got up to, but I also loved that I had the opportunity to travel, say, on the weekends.
Yes.
There were quite a few long weekends in that time. So I got to go, Europe is very small compared to Africa.
Yeah.
And it meant that I could hop on a train and end up in
And
Italy.
it's nicely connected. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I felt so safe there. I felt so safe. At one stage I was walking in the night, about 11, 12 o'clock, and I had my backpack on with my laptop in, my phone in my hand, my earphones in my ear, and I felt safe. A woman at night, unheard of.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that experience, and that was the European experience.
Yes.
But I really wanted to see other parts of Africa.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to get entrenched in other cultures within Africa, get to feel other parts of our landscape. I really wanted to see another part of Africa. And I also wanted my time off, because this was time off basically. It was my own annual leave.
Oh, really?
where
Okay.
I wanted to not just go home and take a break. I wanted to contribute in some way. So I was looking at volunteer organizations that are available, and I found this place called IVHQ, which is International Volunteers Headquarters.
Oh, okay.
And they had a program in Tanzania, in Arusha.
Okay.
So there was 2 spaces that I was very interested in. There was women education, and then there was childcare.
Okay.
And I was very close to choosing women education. I just felt a little young. So I felt as though maybe I wasn't the best person to give advice, which I think was imposter syndrome kicking in more so than anything. But I also really wanted to invest in children, and I love kids. Anyone will tell you, like, they really fill my heart. So I got to volunteer in childcare at a daycare center. There was kids in between, like 6 months old up until about 5 to 6. And they were just amazing. As soon as you walk in the morning, you have them all running up to you and getting you hugged. It was beautiful.
So what kind of work did you do as a volunteer, in the early childhood care center?
It was very interesting. We started, so it's very different to South Africa. I actually spoke to my mother about this as well. And Mondays, for instance, was English.
Okay.
So we'd write on the board, you'd go through the alphabet with them, because most of their first language is Swahili.
Yes.
So you really try and get them also to be able to speak the second language. So we'd focus on that. You go through the alphabet. A or R is for apple. And then you go through.
Now you're becoming a foundation
based teacher. Exactly. And then Tuesday was maths. So also 1 plus 1, but then you bring it up. It was more difficult in the 2 different classes. So I tried spreading my time between the 2 different classes. And then there was Swahili. So I was also learning there.
Wow, that's good.
So that was interesting. So similar with the alphabet. And then I really enjoyed Fridays. It was dance. So it was very fun, activity based. And I think that was also really trying to teach them through play. A lot of the time we'd end up playing with them, we dance with them, we put on some music, Tanzanian music. It was beautiful, and the kids bring the energy. But it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
I'm so happy that you say it's difficult work, because people, especially people who have never been teaching, and you've been surrounded, your mother has been a teacher, so you understand. But people think that teaching is easy. Anyone can just do it, you know. It's not.
It's not. You need strength. You'd see, if I was writing on the board and my back is turned, the one day we got permission from parents and from teachers, but I would have my phone taking videos at stages. So I'd write on the board, and then later on, if I look at the screen, the times that I'm writing on the board, something is happening in that class.
Exactly.
Someone is pushing someone else, and you don't see any of this.
You don't, and that's why we say in teaching, you need to be with it. Which means that you must have your eyes at the back of your head. That's why kids would always say, but the teacher can see everything, because we are trained to do that. We are
honestly.
Yeah, so pedagogy is really important. But now you're really well-rounded, and I really like the sense of purpose that you've had this trauma and what you're taking out of it, and you're not deterred. So for someone watching this today, a girl child from, I will say, Galvandale, and a girl child from KwaMagxaki or Ezwide or New Brighton, watching you, seeing possibilities, someone who looks like them, having done this and have been through, a lot. What would you say to that little girl, who would like to become successful? Maybe not an actuary per se, but, any other thing that, that they want to be. What would you say to that little girl?
There are opportunities out there. And we need to make sure that we are grabbing those opportunities. We are working towards them, and we are applying ourselves to get those opportunities, to make it out of those circumstances, and to be the change for not only yourself, but be the change for your community, for your family, for South Africa at large. And I believe that that's through your own strength, through your own resilience, through your own determination to make that change. Strive for the things that you love, the things that you enjoy, and work on that. If you love the arts, really cultivate your strength within the arts. Focus on that. Because when you are passionate and you enjoy what you are doing, it's when you really make a contribution to society. And when you make sure that you are seeing to your own health, your own happiness. Because a lot of it has to do with your own strength. And you can't be strong if you're not strong for yourself. You're not strong within your mental health, within your thinking. You're not reaching out to your friends when you need help. You're not trying to get that support. Because you don't always have people in your corner, and sometimes you may feel alone, you may feel as if no one is there for you. But the first person that needs to be there for you is you. You need to speak strength into your own voice, into your own power. You need to speak well with yourself. You need to look at yourself and say, I am smart, I am beautiful, I am loved, I have the abilities to take myself out of this. And I think that's something I neglected in my younger years, but it's something that's so important. We need to watch the way we speak to ourselves and watch the way we speak to others. Everyone has a story. Absolutely everyone. Everyone is going through some sort of battle. And unless you speak kindness to them, you won't necessarily receive that kindness back. So I think going into this world with a positive mindset, there isn't always positive surroundings that follow us, but you can control where you are and how you see the world. You can try and see the glass is half full as opposed to half empty. And I think that's something that I really try to do with myself. I have battles even now. I spend a lot of my time with myself. And in that time, you really need to look at who is there for you and reach out to those people if you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Make sure that you're getting support where you need it. If you need to speak to a professional, speak to a professional. I know there is still a taboo sometimes around speaking to a psychologist, but sometimes it is what you need. So make sure that you are getting that help when you need it so that you can go into life and make sure that you make that change.
Wow. Thank you so much, Cara. This has been a very enriching conversation. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I was talking to Cara Geduld. What a well-rounded individual. What an inspirational woman, young woman. Until next time.